Have you ever just looked at that mountain of saved articles, bookmarked videos, and your giant read later list and just felt completely overwhelmed? You know, like you're more of a collector of information than an actual user of knowledge? Well, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful framework to fix that exact problem. It's called the Distillation Protocol, and it's all about building an active, ready-to-use knowledge base that actually serves you, especially when things get chaotic.
So, how do we actually do this? Well, we've got a clear roadmap. First, we're going to diagnose the problem so we know exactly what we're fighting against. Then, we'll move to phase 1 and build a firewall to get control over our information intake. After that, we enter phase 2, the forge, where we turn raw data into solid, usable knowledge. Then, we'll become the architect of our own digital brain in phase 3 and 4, and we'll wrap it all up with a final, crucial warning you really can't afford to ignore.
Okay, first things first, we have to put a name to this disease that affects so many of us in this age of just endless information. We need a clear diagnosis before we can even think about the cure.
And here it is, the collector's fallacy. You know that little rush you get when you save an article or bookmark a video? That little hit of dopamine that makes you feel productive? That's the fallacy in action. But here's the hard truth. Grabbing information is not the same thing as learning it. It's a dangerous illusion of progress without any of the real work of understanding.
So let's just be brutally honest with ourselves for a second. Take a look at this question. Is your read later list a vibrant, active library that you visit every single day? Or is it a digital graveyard where all your good intentions and fascinating articles just go to be forgotten? For most of us, it's the second one. And that is exactly what we are here to change.
So how do we break free from this collector's fallacy? We have to start at the source. Phase 1 is all about building a defensive perimeter, a kind of mental firewall to control the absolute fire hose of information that's aimed at you every single day.
Look, before you can build a solid structure, you gotta clear the site. And that means 4 ruthlessly efficient steps. First, a 30-day freeze on all new stuff. This forces you to stop collecting and finally start processing. Second, the LLM reset. Stop the endless cycle of just generating new, shallow ideas. Third, the quarantine inbox. From now on, you treat all incoming info as potentially hazardous waste until it proves it's valuable. And finally, the cache audit. This is where you confront your old notes. If you can't explain a concept in your own words, well, you never really learned it. It's tough, for sure, but it is absolutely necessary.
Okay, so after that big purge, your quarantine inbox becomes your new gatekeeper. And its main job is to understand one simple fact. Not all information is created equal. You have to triage it. You have to sort out what needs a really deep, high-effort analysis from the stuff that's just there for spark of creativity.
And this is that triage system in action. On one side, you've got the extremistan filter. Think of this as your defensive line. It's for foundational, core knowledge. The question you ask is simple. Will this help me when things go wrong? If the answer is yes, it gets routed to the forge for some deep processing. Everything else? It goes over to the Black Swan sandbox. This is your creative space, your playground for those rare, unexpected ideas that could change everything. It keeps that magic of serendipity alive without polluting your core knowledge base.
All right, now we get to the absolute heart of this entire protocol, the forge. This is where any information that actually survived your firewall gets put under intense pressure, turning it from just raw data into the hardened steel of real, usable knowledge.
Before we even get into the process, you have to burn this one rule into your brain. This is the entire philosophy of the forge. If a piece of information doesn't change what you do, it is not an asset. It is mental bloatware. It's a liability. End of story.
So, this is the 4-step compiler process. First, you strip away all the fluffy, persuasive language to get to the core, verifiable mechanics of the idea. But, and this is key, you always keep the original source attached for context. Second, you run it through the Feynman filter. Can you explain it simply, like to a 5-year-old? If you need a bunch of jargon, nope, you don't understand it yet. Third is formatting, which we'll dive into next. And fourth, the most important step of all, create an executable script, a concrete, real-world action.
Now that third step, progressive formatting, this is the secret sauce. This is the key to making your notes useful months or even years from now. The whole goal here is to design this information as a gift for your future self.
So here's how you layer it. You start with the raw text, the original quote. Then you bold the key sentences. Then you go back and you highlight the absolute essential phrase within those bolded sentences. And finally, you write a one-paragraph summary, the axiom, at the very top in your own words. This structure means your future self can just glance at this note and get the soul of the idea in under 30 seconds.
And this brings us to the final, absolutely non-negotiable test of the Forge. Every single note that you create must answer one question. So what? How does this change my behavior? If you cannot define a specific, executable script based on this piece of knowledge, it has failed the test. It is bloatware, and you delete it without mercy.
All right, so you forged these individual pieces of high-quality knowledge. Now what? Now it's time for phase 3, where we become the architect. This isn't about creating some random wiki page. This is about engineering a permanent operating system for your mind.
See, your system isn't random. It's built in 3 distinct layers. The foundational layer has your mental models, those timeless tools for thinking, like inversion or first principles. This is your core processor. The functional layer holds your heuristics. These are fast, simple rules like, if X happens, I do Y. These are the shortcuts built right on top of your foundational models. And finally, the philosophical layer uses something called via negativa to define you by what you eliminate. This isn't just a list of things you don't like. It's a strategic choice to reduce complexity and decision fatigue.
Now this rule governs your entire system, and it is a fundamental shift from being a passive recipient of information to being an active hunter. You no longer just wander the internet hoping to find something useful. No, instead, you start with a problem, a project to build, an article to write, and you hunt for only the information that helps you solve it. This changes everything. It forces your brain to see connections and applications everywhere.
And this brings us to phase 4. This is where the system gets truly futuristic. We take this meticulously structured knowledge we've built, and we embed it. We make it the soul of a personalized AI partner.
So here's how it works. You create a digital mirror by feeding all your distilled notes into a private AI. It literally learns to think using your mental models. This isn't just storage, it's a cognitive offload. You can then stress test new ideas against your own brain by asking the AI to play devil's advocate. But to maintain intellectual honesty, you have to tag every single note by its certainty level. Is this a wild guess or a proven fact? This stops you from confusing theories with laws, and it forces you to actively challenge your old beliefs whenever new data comes in.
And this brings us to the single most important guardrail for this entire AI system. You are required to build an anti-echo chamber. That means creating a dedicated space, a red team section, for evidence that proves your core beliefs are wrong. A system that's only designed to confirm your biases isn't a tool for growth, it's a machine for self-deception, and it's worse than useless.
So, we've designed the firewall, we've built the Forge, and we've architected the entire system. But all of this sophisticated design is completely useless without understanding this one final, critical warning.
This is the ultimate trap. The danger of spending all your time perfectly organizing your notes, color-coding your tags, tweaking your system, all while never actually using it to change your behavior in the real world. This is called productive procrastination, and it feels really good, but it accomplishes absolutely nothing.
And look, if you only remember one thing from this entire protocol, please let it be this. Perfection is the enemy of execution. An imperfect, kind of messy system that you use ruthlessly every single day will always outperform a flawless one that just sits on a digital shelf. The goal was never to build a perfect library, it was to get better outcomes in the real world.
And that brings us to the final and most important step. This is not a theoretical exercise. The system is built. So the question is, what are you going to execute first? What real-world problem are you going to aim this powerful new tool at? Because the value of any knowledge system is exactly 0 until it's pointed at a target. So go ahead, choose yours.